great Sunday. Let me just reintroduce myself. So I'm Tina Mazange, the trustee for Donate for Refugees. And today I actually have the pleasure of speaking to Emily, a co-coordinator of Calais Food Collective in northern France. Emily, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to everybody joining us online too. And please remember to write in all your questions to Emily just in the bottom, and we'll make sure to answer them at the end. But Emily, are you ready to start?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Wonderful. So, first question in our discussion today is perhaps you'd like to share just a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you first got involved with Calais Food Collective.
Yeah, so I'm a long-term volunteer with the collective. I've been here for 6.5 months now. And yeah, I came in August. And basically the collective started up in April in response to the pandemic, when all of the other NGOs, a lot of NGOs had to pull out because of the lockdown, and there was so much uncertainty at the time. And so the collective started up as like a grassroots organisation to make sure that there was still food provision in Calais. And yeah, so soon after that, I'd just been following it for a while and seeing what was going on, and I was really keen to come and work with them. And yeah, so we're basically getting dry food and cooking ingredients to people in Calais and Dunkirk. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like something amazing that you've been a part of. And I can definitely tell that it's something that I know everyone would like to know more about. So could you tell us more about the situation in Calais and in Dunkirk? Like what awaits for refugees that are actually coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, the situation is really quite grim. It's also changed a lot since in the time that I've been here. It's changed massively. So when I first arrived, there were quite a few larger camps. At one point, one of the camps had around like 800 to 1,000 people in, we estimated. People
Wow.
were relatively settled. And then in the time that I've been here, the police have really ramped up the evictions. So evictions are happening every 48 hours. Which has always been the case, but they've really started making a concerted effort to completely dismantle any kind of large sites that start to grow. So at the moment, we're seeing a situation of like mass homelessness in the centre of town, where like camps that were on the outskirts, people have had to move into the town centre and don't have anywhere to sleep. We're seeing like a lot of people who are on the move without shelter, without anywhere to sleep. So it's become a really, really difficult situation, and something that is really quite unrecognisable from like what it used to be. Yeah, and so it's really difficult conditions to work in.
Wow, that sounds really intense for every party involved. Realistically speaking, that must be quite something to receive. And I mean, I can only imagine with the kind of constant evictions that the living conditions are something that we might need to touch upon today. Like in your experience, what have these living conditions been like when people arrive, and also just as they're trying to find a new place to stay?
Yeah, so the living conditions, especially now that it's in the winter with the weather, are like pretty horrendous. So already, like obviously with the rain and the snow, like people are sleeping outside, like it's pretty horrific. But in addition to that, with the evictions, we've had like a few like large scale evictions where the state has basically come in and bulldozed and kind of cut down all of the trees and all of the natural shelter, so things that people were using to shelter and for firewood as well. So all of that's gone. So places that used to be forests are now just like big muddy fields, and from that we've seen like immense flooding. So a lot of the camps are completely flooded. The areas are really waterlogged, so it's really hard for people to find shelter anywhere. And in addition to that as well, like in the regular evictions that happen every 48 hours, police are taking people's tents or like slashing them and destroying them and taking their belongings. And in the winter, this is like a real risk to people's lives, because there's like a real risk of hypothermia, a real danger of hypothermia. So taking people's tents is like a real act of violence. Yeah, so it's quite horrible living conditions for people at the moment. Yeah, and a lot of like violence and harassment from the police every day as well.
Oh, it's really heartbreaking to hear, because I mean, especially like you said, in winter times, like being outside is difficult anyway. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be in that situation where you're having to relocate every, well, not even days, realistically speaking. And I imagine that with all of this happening, you must have anticipated some kind of reaction from the locals and just people around, because you mentioned the authority. But has Calais Food Collective had to prepare for any of this backlash? And if so, how have you done so?
Yeah, so I think at the moment we kind of are finding less of a passionate reaction from the locals and more kind of indifference or a lack of knowledge. There's a couple of individuals who are known to us who are near certain sites who we've had issues with in the past, and like they've made their views on the work that we do and on displaced people like quite clear to us.
Okay.
But yeah, that's like maybe a couple of individuals around Calais. But beyond that, I think it's just a general sort of lack of knowledge of the situation. And I think there's not very much visibility as well, especially when people are staying on the outskirts. I think in the centre of town, people are very visible. But at the moment, we're just beginning a project to kind of advocate for more involvement from the locals and just try and engage the locals a bit more in what's going on, and make them aware of like what's happening in the city and how they can help, which hopefully will be successful. But yeah, I think it's really important that we work with people who live here on this.
Most definitely. That sounds like a really positive initiative, and I hope that that goes successfully for you all. And it's, I guess, in one sense, nice to hear that it's more of a miseducation or a kind of lack in understanding from that side of things. But when it comes down to the actual violence itself, like, have you seen any blockages or limitations that you might be preventing you from doing the work that you set out to do? Like, I'd like to hear more about, what's happening with the police and other institutions that might be exhibiting those behaviors.
Yeah, so this has been a massive issue that we've had as the Food Collective, which is from September. So we used to distribute in the centre of town, and then in September, the prefecture brought in a ban on food distributions on certain streets. I think it was aimed to try and to expand that across as wide an area as they could. So what's been happening is that every month they update it and they add more streets to it, so it's making it harder and harder for us to work. Yeah, like we've been lucky, like we've just managed to find other streets to distribute on, but that comes with harassment from the police, so they'll come and tell us. Just a couple of days ago, in an area that's nowhere near anywhere that's on the ban, we were distributing water, and we got told by the police that it was illegal for us to distribute water there, that we should know the law, that it was banned, and they'd updated the arrêté. And we produced a copy of the ban and said this isn't on any of the streets, and it had nothing to say because they basically made it up. So we get a lot of lying from the police, a lot of harassment, and basically trying to stop people access food and water. Also, the site that this happened in, they have no other access to water at all apart from what we bring. So the fact that they're trying to go to these lengths to stop people from getting water, and there's no other way for them to have water, it's crazy.
Wow, that seems very intense, extremely intense, especially because you are just trying to do your job, and having these limitations must be really quite disheartening in a lot of different ways. But I know that on the flip side to that, I'm sure that you've met many people that have captured like your heart through the time that you've been there, whether that's a person, a family, just a passing individual. And I wonder if you have any stories that you could share with us now.
Yeah, I think I kind of feel like everyone I speak to here, just everyone deserves so much better than what they have here. And I think the times that I kind of find the hardest working here is when you become really aware of your limitations as an individual and as an organisation to help people, because basically we're providing food for people, but we're not able to get people out of the situation that they're in. Like really we need kind of safe and legal routes to the UK, and so it's when you kind of speak to people or you've known someone for a while that becomes really, really obvious. Like there's one man who I've known for a little while now, and we don't have like any language in common at all, so whenever we speak it's always on Google Translate. We just have to like translate everything, and yeah, like I just asked him how he was one day, and he just said he's really upset because he feels like he doesn't have any support to get out of the situation that he's in, and that he was just like, I just want to be a person like everyone else, and like I've got goals that I want to reach and that I can't. And yeah, and he just wanted somewhere calm and quiet to sleep, and yeah, and we just couldn't offer him that. And yeah, it's just a bit, yeah, it's just as soon as you start to like get to know people and speak to people, and yeah, people just want a normal life, and like we can't really offer that. So yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a really, really upsetting situation, because I imagine like you have seen quite a number of these people, and yeah, like you said yourself, language might be a barrier, but it's not when people are trying to communicate the same need and the same want and the same understanding of the fact that they want just to be treated like anybody else. So I think that's something that is really important to take away from this, like to really see that these refugees are just trying to get what they can to be able to help their lives at the end of the day. And thinking about the help that you provide, what services have your team provided over the years, and how has this made a difference to the quality of their lives?
Yeah, so we were kind of set up to provide like dry food for cooking, and which I think the aim of that is to just kind of give people a bit more autonomy and a bit more choice over what they're eating. Because when you're working in an emergency situation like this, obviously it's like providing things for survival, like shelter and food.
Yes.
But we wanted to do that in a way that allows people to choose what they're eating and when they eat. So we go into people's camps, we go to their fires, and we bring them a selection of food, and we say, we have these things today, like which things do you want? And people say, oh yeah, we have beans already, like we want, you know, tomatoes and spices or something. We try to offer as much choice as possible. And then yeah, people choose what they want and say how many people they are, and then they have food for the next 2 days to like cook, and then we come back in in 2 days time and bring it again. So yeah, the aim of that is just so that people aren't having to walk to distributions, like they don't have to like leave their living space and go out in the cold. And then also that it kind of gives maybe a sense of community as well, to be able to cook together is really nice. And yeah, and being able to have stocks of food, like something to rely on as well, not being worried that if you miss that food distribution you're not going to be able to eat for the day, like just knowing that you've got something with you to eat is really good for people, I hope. But yeah, in addition to that as well, we try to do some like emergency response work as well. So after big evictions, we try to do like ready to eat food packs when there's no other food available. And then we've also been dealing a lot with water insecurity. We found like massive issues in one area, Coquel. The state used to provide food and water there, but then since this massive cycle of evictions, people have become like very dispersed and very displaced, and the state decided to pull out their like food and water support, because according to them there aren't any people there anymore, but there's still loads and loads of people there. So we've been providing water there every day, but that started to become quite difficult for us to keep providing that. And then in the town centre as well, we spoke to people and asked like what their water access is like, and they said they have to walk like an hour to get water anywhere. So we're going to try and start supporting them with water as well. So yeah, these are the ways that we're trying to do things, both in a way for people who are more settled, and then also for like emergency situations as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's totally commendable, the way that you've tried to diversify, but also balance between, you know, your day-to-day work and also like sort of emergency responses. So that, and I feel like this feeds in nicely to our next question, which essentially we can't ignore the fact the pandemic has been quite tumultuous for everybody. And I think it's fair to say that 2020 will have its teething issues, and that will certainly impact refugees in France. And can you talk to us about the past couple of months and like the COVID, like the impact that COVID has had, and what this meant for the way that you deliver things, and just the way that you've had to react and diversify the way you roll out your projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously with the COVID, like it's really dangerous in a situation like this where people are sleeping outside and they don't have any means of social distancing and no access to hot water or proper hygiene. Like it's a really, really bad situation. And then for us, we're trying to work in a way that kind of mitigates those risks. So by going into people's camps, it's rather than having like a really busy distribution where like everyone's in the line. Obviously, like that's something that we do sometimes as well, because we are working in a context where access to food and water is actually a priority over the pandemic, which is crazy. Like the fact that it's because people don't have basic human rights. So that's the real like emergency. Which so we're doing that. And we've been able to keep working despite the lockdowns. And it hasn't affected our ability to deliver the service too much, except for kind of having issues with getting things over from the UK, like getting stock over, getting volunteers as well. And then we've had a few COVID scares as well here, which means that there's been times when our team is a bit depleted or other teams are a bit depleted, and we have to help each other out and support each other, because it's obviously we can't risk bringing COVID onto the field and into the communities in the situation that they're in.
No, totally. Like it, I imagine like, well, it's been an impact for everybody, but it's good to see that you've managed to find ways to get around that. Though tricky, we can't deny that it is still very tricky. And yeah, that's really great to hear. But I mean, just wanted to note to our brilliant viewers, please remember to share all of your questions. I can see some rolling in now, and we'll be able to actually answer those near the end of our conversation. But we would love to hear your thoughts. So Emily, the last question from me, I want to talk to you a little bit about what it means to support people at home here in the UK from around the world. Like, what would you need or like us to do to be able to help you continuing to give the brilliant things that you already offer?
So I think one of the most important things is like for us, like having support in the UK is so important, because so much of the issues here are coming from the UK. It's like the UK border, and it's the government that is kind of financing and enacting like the hostile environment policies that have caused this situation. So really like raising awareness and putting pressure on our government to change things is like a massive one. And then in the shorter term, donating to organizations on the ground who are trying to help in the short term, and also organizations who are trying to do advocacy projects and trying to change things in the long term as well. But yeah, I think there's such a lack of knowledge both in France and in the UK of what's happening here, of what the actual context is, what the situation is and why it's happening, and just really trying to speak about it and get information from the ground into the UK is like massively important.
Definitely. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? Please lobby your MPs, speak to people, spread information, because we really need to keep brilliant organisations and charities working the way that they're working, like the Calais Food Collective. So thank you so much, Emily. And I'm going to take a look at the comments just now, and let's see which ones we can answer. So the first one we had from Sophie, because it's in relation to, I guess, the different types of food that you can offer. Would big sacks of like chapati flour and rice flour be able to help to make different items? So would you say that there's certain things that you would need more, or would like more, or have a higher aptitude for people like refugees that they like? And is there any way that external people can supply that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I'm hoping to set up, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, is a needs list, and then also a sponsor a pallet scheme on our website, which will make it really, really clear what we need. But definitely flour and rice are things that we always need. Like we do distribute flour. And then also like oil is one of the biggest ones. Like oil is really expensive and it's a source of fat, so it's really important in the winter. And tomatoes as well, we go through really fast. So definitely oil and tomatoes, and then rice and flour are like all big ones.
Perfect. Wonderful. We've got another question from Sarah. And I think this is a really important question. And essentially, are your suppliers impacted by Brexit, or is it too early to say? Do you think it's going to be something that could become more in effect as we ease out of our pandemic situation and kind of get to focus more on Brexit? What are your thoughts and feelings towards that?
This has become a massive issue recently. We have an order of stock that we're trying to get over at the moment, and we're having big issues with it. I think no one's quite sure at the moment of what exactly it is that we need to get things over and like what the protocols are now. So there's been a lot of instability and a lot of confusion. And at the moment, our stocks are really low and there's a lot of stuff we need to get from the UK. So hopefully, cross fingers, we'll be able to get it across. But we're currently looking for suppliers in France and in the EU because I think that's going to be the way forward. It's going to be really hard to get things from the UK, I think, in future.
Okay, no, that's definitely understood. Yeah, I think tough one to tackle, but I feel like as long as we put all of our brains together, we should find a way absolutely through it. And I think I actually do have like another question, because we obviously massively care about the well-being of refugees that we come into contact with. But I also wanted to know how the volunteers kind of cope day to day with what they get to see. Is there anything in place that you already have just to manage how you guys are feeling and being able to actually deliver your service effectively?
Yeah, so I think in a small team like ours, this is a really important one because as a collective, we're all involved in all parts of the work. So we're all on the field, we're all responsible for stock and all responsible for the finances and things. So it's a lot of responsibility all the time for everyone in the team. So we try and like support each other by like, we have to have 2 days off a week. You have to take your days off. We have to take breaks quite regularly. And and just kind of trying to support each other and check in with each other and communicate well and respect each other's boundaries and limitations. But it's really good working in a team like ours, and we all live together as well. And it is nice because it's like having a shared experience. Like we all understand the kind of difficulties of working here, and we can support each other. So.
Fantastic. Great. Well, Emily, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, and thank you for everything that you do. And I hope that this continues long forward. And thank you to everyone for joining us actually and engaging online. And Emily, we'll add everything, your fundraising links, and hopefully we'll be able to get more understanding of how we can offer help to you. And next week, well, in 2 weeks' time, we've actually got another Facebook Live with Lizette catching up with Rando of One Human Race for an update on all the situations in Athens and surroundings. But unless you've got anything left to add today, Emily, please do, if so.
Not massively, but just keep spreading awareness, keep talking about what's happening here, and that's like the biggest thing. Yeah.
Will do. Well, thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay well, and have a happy Sunday, and we'll speak to you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.